When I think about all my favorite long-running franchises that I grew disappointed with over time, nothing really comes close to My Hero Academia. I don't think there's been a manga that caught the world by storm only to fade out of public consciousness so quickly. For a while, My Hero Academia became the face of shonen. It came during a time when the old guard was coming to a close and people were hungry for something new. But within just a couple years, it faded into obscurity for most people. It doesn't even crack the top 5 in a lot of Shonen Jump sales reports anymore. Even now, as it's in its final arc, I rarely see anyone outside of dedicated forums talking about it, often being disregarded for later shonens like Jujutsu Kaisen or Demon Slayer. But how did this happen? How did a story that caught lightning in a bottle lose relevance so quickly? I wanted to give My Hero the benefit of the doubt and believe that it would be worth it in the end. I didn't want to believe that this story that I had been following for so long had fallen apart so badly. But I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. I can't hold in this frustration anymore. This video is for me, goddammit. I need to put this to rest and move on with my life. I should put up some formalities before starting. First off, I'm going to be mostly talking about the manga, including sections that haven't been adapted by the anime, so if you're an anime only, I'd really suggest holding off on this video until you have everything. Second, I'm going to be giving Horikoshi a lot of shit, but I want to make it clear right now that I have more respect for Kohei Horikoshi than I think he has for himself. He is a very talented man, and I hope that he finds the happiness he couldn't find while making MHA, and if he actually does write that horror manga that he talked about, then I'll be the first to pick it up. With all that said, welcome to the ramblings of an insane person about a Japanese manga meant for 12-year-olds. My Hero Academia first started serialization in July 2014 for Weekly Shonen Jump magazine, though I wouldn't get into it until about 2018 when my friends recommended me the anime. Like a lot of people out there, this was my first anime I really got invested in. I had watched shows like Cowboy Bebop or Full Metal Alchemist before MHA, but this is the one I seriously became obsessed with. I ended up picking up the manga later on, starting with the Overhaul arc, and I loved it even more. The characters, the world, and the art style were just the coolest thing to my 18-year-old mind. It was the first weekly manga series I kept up with. Moments like All Might vs. All for One, Deku vs. Gentle Criminal, and pretty much the entirety of the PLW arc would come to define what I loved about shonen. Written and illustrated by Kohei Horikoshi, it told the story of Izuku Midoriya, or Deku as most people call him, and how he became the world's greatest hero. And at first glance, it doesn't seem that much different from your typical shonen story. You got the weak main character who slowly becomes the best, you got the asshole rival, and you got the big supporting cast. But it's the subversion of these tropes that make the story special. In the world of MHA, people are born with quirks, or superpowers to put it more literally. This leads to the rise of heroes, or people who use their quirks to stop crimes. In MHA, being a hero is every kid's dream. Heroes in MHA are like celebrities. They have the lives we all wish we had. But Deku doesn't have a quirk. He's quirkless, which in real-world terms is like being disabled. This makes him an easy target for everybody. It's very easy to pick on him for it. The biggest offender being Katsuki Bakugo, a former friend of Deku who has the quirk Explosion. The world puts Deku down at every turn, constantly telling him that his dream of being a hero, it's just not gonna happen. Even his own mother doesn't believe him, something that would haunt both of them for years. But despite all of this, he keeps his chin up, constantly telling himself that he could do it. And this all changes when he meets his favorite hero, All Might. On his way home from school, Deku runs into a villain made of sludge, who then tries to possess Deku's body as his own. But just before he can get taken, Deku's idol, All Might, saves him. All Might is the symbol of peace, the #1 hero, someone who, just looking at, will bring you a smile to your face and tell you, hey, it's okay. You're safe now. And after some flight shenanigans, they land on a nearby rooftop where they have a talk. And here, Deku asks All Might if a quirkless kid like him could ever be a hero. And All Might tells him that it won't happen. All Might lays out very clear just how dangerous hero work can be, and someone without any powers to defend themselves. They're just asking to be killed. It's something that Deku had known already, but had been denying this whole time. And then, All Might leaves, off to save the next person in trouble. After wandering around for a bit, Deku stumbles into a villain fight with the same sludge monster. And this time, the sludge monster is trying to possess someone else. And after a second, he realizes that person is Bakugo. And then, one of the best moments in MHA occurs. All of a sudden, Deku's body moves on its own, and he's running at the sludge monster to save him. He throws his bag, he's clawing at the sludge, he's doing anything he can think of. And this moment goes to show what's so great about Izuku Midoriya. Even without any powers and the odds stacked against him, nothing will stop him from helping others. Even if it's someone like his bully who hates him, he'll stop at nothing. That doesn't matter. Sometimes even to a fault, which the later arcs in the story do a very bad job at handling, but we're not ready for that discussion yet. And you can't watch the earlier seasons of the show and not find yourself rooting for him. Part of the reason I think the story caught on so quickly is because his life sucks big time. He doesn't have any friends, he gets bullied constantly, and the entire world is out to get him. So when he finally gets his chance to be a hero, it's a huge moment in Deku's life. One that he doesn't waste. One of my favorite moments from Deku still to this day is his fight with Muscular, a villain who's huge, powerful, and very deadly. Muscular is someone who craves killing just for the fun of it. If he were up against anyone else in Class A, they would have given up, but Deku fights back. All just to save one little boy that he doesn't even know. But to Deku, that doesn't matter. This person is in trouble and they need a hero. Man, this scene is so amazing. I go back and rewatch this fight so much. It's amazing. I'm just gonna play a little clip for it here.
I won't let you hurt Koda! Damn it! How are you getting stronger? You won't lay a hand on him! One for all! 1,000,000%!
Yeah. He's a hero. This isn't even the only example of this. Deku's fight with Overhaul in the Mafia arc has all of this too, except this time he has an even greater use of One for All. And Deku's pursuit to save Shigaraki from All for One embodies this the best.
I don't know what I should do next, that's true. And I get that the only way to stop him might be to kill him, but...
I want to save that little kid!
It doesn't matter who you are, as long as you're in trouble, he'll be there to save you. Deku is the hero that we all wish we could be. He's someone that we aspire to have the qualities of, someone who is through and through a hero to his core. He may not have as cool a power as some of the others in the class, but he has something that they don't. If All Might is a symbol of peace, then Deku is a symbol of hope. As long as he's out there, good will triumph over evil, and the world will be saved. And the rest of the cast can see this just as well. Most particularly, All Might. After seeing this display of heroics from a boy with no powers, All Might decides to take Deku under his wing and make him his successor. Deku would become the 9th wielder of One for All, a quirk that's passed through multiple people, becoming stronger the more it's passed on. And let me talk about All Might for a bit now. All Might is the #1 hero for the first act of MHA, and the best character in Act 1, hands down. And to really illustrate this, let me tell you all a story. There's a video on YouTube displaying All Might's fight with Nomu in Season 1, and it has over 19 million views. And the comments at the top are most of the time new. Very rarely will you find ones that were created 7 years ago. Now tell me, does this remind you of anything? If you're an MHA fan like me, you're probably screaming the answer. At the beginning of My Hero Academia, Deku tells us a story about him as a child. There was an old video he watched about All Might being a hero. In the face of danger, All Might had a huge smile on his face while he saved over 100 people from a fire. This is what convinced Deku that he wanted to be a hero. Well, In the real world, we're all our own Izuku Midoriya in a way. We as a species have watched that video millions of times, where All Might is the greatest hero in the world. This fight, even today, is one of the best moments in MHA. The thing about All Might is that he has a disability on his quirk where he can only use it for about 3 hours a day. This is what accentuated the need for All Might to find a successor, but he can't just give it to anyone. He has to find someone who could rise up and be a symbol of peace just like him. So when he sees the display of heroship from Deku, he knows that Deku is the one to succeed him. But All Might is still a hero, and still has a duty as the symbol of peace, so until Deku's ready, he still has a job to do. So when he's already used up most of his time, the situation becomes even more dangerous. Nomu is a horrific abomination created by the villains to kill All Might, meaning he can withstand All Might's very powerful punches. But in one of the greatest displays of a hero that I've ever seen, All Might perseveres. He pummels the Nomu with punch after punch after punch after punch until finally he lands the killing blow, blasting Nomu into the sky. This fight is awesome. It's a great starter for what will be the recurring theme of MHA: heroism. This show can remind people that, yeah, being a hero is amazing, something that I think is kind of lost in the modern day. Don't get me wrong, I love a villain or an anti-villain any day of the week, but this show reminded me that, yeah, it's cool to root for the good guys. And this isn't even All Might's best fight. His fight against All For One and Kamino is probably the best part of the whole series, if I'm being objective. But part of it is ruined by some of the recent stuff in the manga, but no, hold your tongue. We'll save it for later. Honestly, these two fights alone are worth reading My Hero for, but I think even beyond that, it says something about All Might. The reason why All Might is the #1 hero is that his presence ensures people that they're safe. And the best part about All Might is that he completely lives up to the hype. Modern movies and TV shows nowadays like to go with the broken old hero mentor as a staple for their stories. Two very, mixed results. So, All Might actually being the great hero that Deku says he was is so refreshing. The real heart of My Hero Academia is Deku and All Might's relationship, and how they both grow off each other. They have this father-son dynamic that's really adorable to watch a lot of the time.
That's why, no matter what happens to you, I'll be there to help fight fate!
All Might was the hero of a generation. Every hero student held some admiration for him, with the biggest being Deku and Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo is the rival character of Deku and the breakout star of My Hero Academia. While views on him are very divided over in the West, in Japan he's almost universally loved. With the exception of the first, he won every single popularity poll by a massive landslide. And I think it's because the character arc that he goes through is the easiest to follow throughout the whole story. Like, even people who hate Bakugo admit that, yeah, he's a lot different than he was at the beginning. At the beginning of the story, Bakugo is an asshole. He's a hot-headed narcissist, believing himself to be superior to everybody. He's extremely cocky, he talks down on everyone, and he bullies those he finds to be inferior. And you better believe that Deku was his biggest victim. Bakugo's quirk is Explosion, and it lets him do, well, exactly that. He can explode stuff with his hands. Not only is it extremely powerful, but it gets stronger the longer he's in battle. Thus, he gets pampered by everyone around him, his teachers, his classmates, and even Deku.
Awesome! You're so lucky!
Yeah! Impressive. I bet you that's gonna grow into an amazing quirk.
Definitely. A flashy quirk for a future hero. It's perfect.
Yeah, you're right. I am amazing.
From the very beginning, Bakugo boasts that, yeah, I'm the new hot shit in town. I'm gonna be the #1 hero. Just you wait. And he has the skills and grades to back it up. Bakugo's just naturally good at everything. So, he expected that UA would be no different. He'd curb stomp everyone around him and become the #1 hero in no time. But that didn't happen. On their second day of school, Deku and Bakugo end up in a battle trial against each other, and the impossible occurs. Deku beats him. not only beats him, but he beat him in front of the whole class. He made Bakugo look like an idiot. Now make no mistake, this was going to happen no matter what, but Deku being the one to beat him made it so much worse. All of a sudden, this scrawny little kid with no powers was standing up to him, and not only that, but beat him. For their whole lives, the roles they played was Bakugo was awesome and Deku was a loser. But this single moment where Bakugo lost shook the whole world around him. And this just gets worse as time goes on. Bakugo doesn't get stronger as the story goes on. If anything, he remains about on the same on the power scaling tier list. He starts out as the strongest in the class, but is slowly eclipsed by his peers. And even he knows this. Throughout the story, he slowly accepts the truth that he's not special. If there was ever anyone who the term crushed by expectations applied to, it was Bakugo, no doubt about that. Nothing ever goes his way. He always gets one-upped by everyone, and every victory he gets is completely unearned, and he knows that. Like when he wins the sports festival, he knows it's bullshit. He knows Todoroki threw the match, and he's infuriated when he gets handed first place because he wanted to be undoubtedly the best. And that didn't happen. Because, well, I'm sorry, but that's not real life. You're not gonna win everything. Not everything is gonna go your way. And you need to accept that. And it's during his second fight with Deku that everything comes to a breaking point. All of the emotions he had been holding in him for so long had finally come out. Nothing was going his way. He was being made a laughingstock for so long. And he was the reason that All Might lost his powers. He was the one who ruined the #1 hero.
You got so much better, and I destroyed All Might! I admired him so much. But it's because of me that he ended up losing his power! I can't get it out of my head! It's like it's constantly playing on loop! So what the hell am I supposed to do?
And from here on forward, Bakugo has to change. He has to accept the truth. He is not special, and he never was. He was just born with a powerful quirk, and that was never gonna make him the best. What makes the dynamic between him and Deku so compelling is that they both represent two sides of All Might. While Deku wants to save, Bakugo wants to win. If Deku is a symbol of hope, then Bakugo is a symbol of victory. He will win no matter what the cost, and if I'm gonna give Hori any credit, it's that he still has this mentality even now in the final arc. And it's through his interactions at UA that Bakugo realizes all the mistakes he made as a child. He knows how much of an awful person he is, and he wants to make up for it. And he knows that Deku will never forgive him. And such is life. And it's through Deku that Bakugo learns that saving others is just as much a factor in being a hero as simply beating up a villain. And come on, let's not mince words here. Everyone at one point thought Bakugo was going to be the villain of the story. He had the perfect setup to be the story's antagonist. But like I said, the manga subverts your expectations. Even with his twisted mentality, Bakugo is a hero and will be a hero no matter what. And seeing this asshole kid grow over the course of the story into being a hero is one of the most rewarding character arcs I've ever seen.
You two, get in there and have some fun.
What are you doing? Get your hands off of me! You think I'm impressed by this?
You're their leader, aren't you, kid? If you keep looking down on everyone else, you'll never be able to see your own weaknesses. That's just some advice from one of your elders, so don't forget it.
Bakugo's character arc is great, to the point where even people who don't care for MHA find something to love with him. When focused, Horikoshi is very good at writing specific characters, and that depth can be seen in the rest of the cast as well. Ochako, Hawks, the League of Villains, but it's at its best with the Todoroki family. The Todoroki family represents all of My Hero Academia's best elements. They're by far the most tightly written part of this story, and it starts with the #2 hero, Endeavor. Enji Todoroki is someone who, for his entire life, sought the glory of being the undisputed best. He had the skill and talent that anyone would need to reach that goal. But sadly, he could never beat his competition and would forever be stuck at second place. But not willing to let things go, he sought other means of reaching the top. If I can't become the best, maybe my children could. Someone who held the power of both fire and ice. someone who could be so strong that they would have no weaknesses. The problem is that this took multiple tries to get the result he wanted. His firstborn, Toya, initially showed promise with fire that had greater potential than his own, but his body was akin to that of his mother's and would hurt him the more he pushed. His second and thirdborns, Fuyumi and Natsu, would only inherit their mother's ice. It was with his fourth child, Shoto, that he finally hit the jackpot. Endeavor's relationship with the rest of the family would only get worse as time went on, most specifically with Toya. Enji had planted ideas in Toya's head that he could become the greatest hero, but upon learning about his body's weakness, Enji would discard Toya almost immediately. Toya desperately sought his father's love to the point that he would train in secret to avoid being caught, but every time he tried to show Endeavor that he was worthy, he would be reprimanded time and time again, with his mother Rei failing to get through to him and being pushed down by others stronger than her.
Look at me! Endeavor!
Tragedy would soon hit the family when Toya died in a fire, and soon after, Rei would strike Shoto, permanently scarring his left eye. Rei would be admitted into a psychiatric ward, but Shoto would forever hold what happened against his father, and by the time he got to high school, he outright refused to use his left side, as it meant letting Endeavor win. It's only after his fight with Deku in the sports festival that Shoto takes his first step into accepting who he is. Much like Bakugo, Shoto doesn't really get stronger as the story goes on. His progression is in how he starts accepting people into his life, and the person that kickstarted this was Deku. Just as I mentioned before, Deku will always help those in need. That includes those who can't help themselves. During Deku's fight with Shoto at the sports festival, they both undergo a test of endurance, and the reason for this is because Deku saw just how much relying on his frost hurt Shoto. In this fight, Shoto accepts who he is.
You are not a prisoner of your lineage. It's okay to use your power, to become who you want to be.
Shoto unleashes his fire, and it's beautiful. From here on forward, he just keeps progressing. He sees his mother again, he makes friends with his class, and he's just more social in general. Shoto's arc is about accepting that he is who he is, no matter what his past was, and no matter what his powers are. But by far the best character in My Hero is Endeavor. After All Might's fight with All for One at Kamino, he loses his last ember of One for All, and is forced to retire, thus making Endeavor the #1 hero by default. Not only was Endeavor forced into the #1 position, but everything that he had done to his family had come crashing down on him. At least before All Might's retirement, Endeavor could argue that the ends justified the means, but now he has nothing to fall back on. So much like Bakugo, Endeavor has to atone for what he did, except this time it's far too late to make amends. Thus, the only thing he can do is support them financially while being the best hero he can be. And this begins with his fight against the high-end Nomu. This fight is when Endeavor became everyone's favorite character. He gets his ass handed to him for most of the fight. The Nomu makes a complete joke of him. One attack even scars his face permanently. I remember when this was serializing, so many people thought he was gonna die. But yet again, the manga subverted your expectations. Endeavor keeps going further, amping up the temperature to insane degrees that even he has trouble maintaining. And then we get this iconic scene.
Endeavor is still standing!
If that isn't the show of a hero, I don't know what is. And this sort of character work can be seen for the villain's side as well. Tomura Shigaraki, the main villain of the story, goes through his own rise to power alongside Deku. If Deku's story is about him becoming a hero, then Shigaraki's story is about him becoming a villain. At the beginning, Shigaraki is a loser. He's extremely incompetent, and he's considered nothing more than a man-child by all the pros. It's when All for One exits the picture that he has to come into his own as a villain and lead this ragtag team to victory. And he does! The first thing they do is take control of an entire army of villains. They straight up overthrow the leadership of an extremist group and take it as their own. It's during the My Villain Academia arc that we learn more about all the villains, including Shigaraki. Shigaraki is the grandson of Nana Shimura, All Might's mentor. His real name is Tenko Shimura, and he wanted to be a hero. But his father, who was abandoned by Nana, takes his anger out on him. He hates heroes for ruining his life, and the very thought of his son wanting to be one disgusts him. Anytime Tenko brings up heroes in the slightest, his father beats him, and the rest of the family does nothing but watch. And this brings up a topic that I want to discuss for a little bit. A major theme of My Hero Academia is nurture versus nature. This is a topic that I don't really see discussed that much. Deku could have easily been a villain. He was born quirkless in a world that hated people like him. He was bullied constantly. But despite all of that, he still wanted to be a hero. And the reason that he didn't become a villain is because he grew up in a loving household. The reason that Tenko became a villain is because he grew up in a household that hated him. No one ever lifted a finger to help him. Even his sister, who he was closest with, ended up ratting him out in one instance. He had no one to trust. He had no one who could support him emotionally.
Tenko! You went into my study?
The humidity after the rain caused my ragged skin to sting.
What did you see? That's not your grandmother. She abandoned her family. When she left.
Someone!
You'll learn. Heroes hurt those who love them!
Tenko's life was miserable. His body itched all over him. His father hated him. He grew up in a terrible house. He had no emotional support. The only time he was ever happy was when he was playing with his dog. And it was pretty wholesome to watch. Sometimes he would even cry with his dog right next to him there to hug him. It's pretty touching, actually.
What just...
Then Tenko's quirk came in. And it's the worst thing that could have happened. Like any boy in this situation, he accidentally kills his family. And then his father comes out, sees this small child, and he hits him.
I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Daddy. Please. Die!
An absurd sense of pleasure shot through my entire body. And just like that, I didn't itch anymore.
After running away from home, Tenko would search for people to help him. He would wander the streets aimlessly in hopes that someone would give him support. And someone did. The one who found Tenko was All For One. All For One teaches Tenko that you don't have to bend to what people want you to do. The itching that you're going through right now, there's only one way it can be satisfied. By living out your pleasures. And for Tenko, those pleasures are killing people. This is how Tenko finds happiness in his life. By bringing destruction wherever he goes. And Tenko discovers that killing others brings him ease, calms his mind, gives him pleasure, and thus, Tenko takes on the role as the new symbol of evil. He takes the hands from everyone in his family and wears them on his body, taking up the name Tomura Shigaraki. The League of Villains are the underdogs of this story. They are the ones with nothing to lose and everything to prove. They live their lives however they please, and if someone has a problem with that, well, they can die. Shigaraki is not the only example of this. All of the villains get their own personal development. Not only that, but the story takes the time to set up their relationships with each other and what they mean to one another. There's a lot to love about the League. The wholesome friendship between Shigaraki and Spinner, the bizarre interactions between Dabi and Mr. Compress, but by far the best is the lovely bond between Toga and Twice. In a weird way, the League is kind of relatable. All they want to do is live their lives like they want, even if it causes the misery of others, but why should they care what others think about them? And it's pretty great to watch their rise to power. They were the villains that no one took seriously and no one thought would be a big deal, but they ended up being one anyway. In a weird way, it kind of makes you root for them. All of these elements working in tandem is what made MHA catch on with people. It was the character drama. There wasn't much technical layers to the fights, but the emotions of said fights were so captivating. At its core, it's about people growing up and finding out who they are, both the heroes and the villains. Which brings us to the Paranormal Liberation War. This arc acts as the payoff of so many different plot lines of Act 1 and 2, while also setting up things to come. There's a lot that happens in this arc, but as far as the raid goes, the highlight is easily Twice versus Hawks. Hawks, who had deceived his way into the League through Twice, had been gathering intel on all of them, feeding it to the heroes. And along the way, he befriended Twice and believed him to be worth saving, unlike the rest of them. Twice, having already caused one of the members to be killed, is infuriated upon hearing this and does everything he can to kill Hawks. And as much as Hawks wanted to spare Twice, he was forced to kill him.
It's true that in my life, I kept falling and failing. I got tricked, lost a friend, and still ended up getting fooled again. But I was blessed with people I cared about.
Jane! Thank you for saving me, friend.
Who could ask for a better life than that? I was happy with my life. With them.
I'm not crying, fuck you, you're crying. This is probably the best handled death in the story. Twice's story is complete, and the plotline he leaves behind is handled very well. I have a lot of problems with Hawks' role in the story after this, but this is probably the highlight of his character. And as much as the fanboys will try to argue against it, no. Hawks killing Twice is portrayed in a negative light, and rightfully so. It was entirely Hawks' fault that it got to this point, and he knows that very well. And after this is when Shigaraki emerges. He straight up disintegrates an entire building along with all the heroes inside. And with this new power, he does what anyone would do. He goes after One for All, the only power that has any chance of stopping him. Shigaraki chases Deku and Bakugo across Jakku until they're forced to try to fight him off. Other heroes show up to help, but it's all for naught. Shigaraki takes them down with ease. As the heroes and villains scramble to get control of the situation, Deku is forced to fight off Shigaraki on his own. And this is Deku's rage moment. Someone close to him got hurt because of Shigaraki, and he goes berserk, punching him multiple times at 100%, critically damaging his arms. It gets to the point where it looks like Deku can hardly hold his body together. And here's through a flashback with Bakugo that we learn a new piece of information about Izuku Midoriya. Because of his life before coming to UA, Deku doesn't hold any value on his own life. He believes that he is someone who is given a chance to be a hero by a miracle and has to make up for that by saving anyone he can, even if it means him getting hurt or killed. And everything we've seen about Deku backs this up. Deku is a hero to a fault, and Bakugo knows that he's partially responsible for this. So when Bakugo sees what's going on, he knows he has to stop it. In one last-ditch effort, he along with Shoto and Endeavor try to put Shigaraki down for good. But it's all in vain, because All for One had one last card to play. He takes control of Tomura's body and throws one more attack at the heroes. And what happens next might be my favorite moment in the whole story.
Little brother.
In that moment, my body just moved on its own.
If there was ever a moment that should embody Bakugo's character arc, it's this right here. All of the development and growth he had gone through had all been for this moment. Not only does he save Deku, but his body moved on its own, just like Deku's did when Bakugo was in trouble at the beginning of the story. This is the first moment Bakugo had where he went out of his way to save someone, and it's amazing. Now, before we keep going with this arc, I want to talk about something that I think is misunderstood by most fans of the series, and that's the plotline between Ochako Uraraka and Himiko Toga. Ochako gets a lot of flack for just being Deku's fangirl, and is often described as disappointing by the fanbase, and their reasoning for this is because her initial motivation of being a hero was making money for her struggling parents, and all of a sudden, she forms a crush on Deku. Many later scenes of Ochako involve her internalizing her own feelings towards this, so people have just decreed that she has no worth as a character. Yeah, so if you even think about this criticism for more than 5 seconds, it completely falls apart. I know shonens don't have a particularly good track record when it comes to treatment of women, but this is not one of those instances. How dare a 15-year-old girl, who's in the time of her life when she's discovering the most about herself, have a crush on someone? How dare she be conflicted on that? How dare she see that crush as an influence? What's the problem with that? Because if you're gonna rag on her for it, then I better see you doing the same thing for Bakugo. He obsesses over Deku as well. Hell, he's way worse about it. Even now in the final arc, Bakugo can't have anything without Deku being right next to him for it. Same thing for Shoto. The whole reason he was able to find his real reason for being a hero was because of Deku. Then there's Ida, who's had his own realization because of Deku. Then there's All Might, whose entire point of view about quirkless people was changed because of Deku. I could keep going, but you all get the point. All the characters in this story revolve in some shape or form around Deku, because he's the main character. So only criticizing Ochako for it feels very disingenuous. Ochako Uraraka wants to help others, so of course she's inspired by her classmate who does that. That's why, just like Deku, she has her own villain she wants to save. Himiko Toga's journey parallels Ochako's. Toga was rejected by her parents for having quirk fetishes. They gave her half-assed quirk counseling. So after years of her parents just yelling at her to stop, she broke and harmed a boy at her school. A direct parallel to how Ochako wanted to help her parents, but they wanted her to follow her own path and not be held down by their struggles. Ochako, at her core, wants to help people who can't help themselves. She wants to see people smile. She wants people to be happy. That's why she's so drawn to saving Toga from going down a spiral of misery. And Toga, who's tired of being tricked by people, refuses to listen to her and runs away. It's just another great character drama that made this series so popular, and I see fans dismiss it far too much. But back to the fight. The tide turns very quickly in the villain's favor when the rest of the league shows up. And if all that stuff I mentioned before wasn't enough, we are treated to one hell of a bombshell.
Can't say exactly what.
Sorry to interrupt. My name is Toya Todoroki. The #1 hero is my father.
Dabi comes out and reveals what many had been theorizing for a long time. Yes, Dabi is actually Toya Todoroki, Endeavor's first son who was thought to have died as a child. And this reveal breaks both Endeavor and Shoto as Dabi dances on top of Makia, mocking Endeavor for all of his mistakes and everything he put his family through. He uploads a video describing his life story for the entire world to see, blasting both Endeavor and Hawks. In one fell swoop, Dabi had altered the entire world's views on heroes. A fight breaks out again with the heroes and villains once again scrambling to take control, but just as the heroes might finally catch a break, All For One
assumes control of this form
and puts down the heroes one last time. Deku, in a struggle to get up, tries to stop All For One, but is ultimately the last who goes down, signaling this battle as a win for the villains. And just as Deku loses consciousness, he thinks back to Shigaraki in the Vestige world.
Back there, when you were being overtaken by All For One, you looked like you wanted to be saved.
I've seen people criticize this moment as, why would Deku want to save a killer? But that's not really what's going on here. Deku will never forgive Shigaraki, but he sees someone who's in pain and wants to be saved. Deku is someone who always wants to help others, so yeah, of course he'd want to help someone who's been manipulated by the greatest villain. This arc is just so good. And it breaks my heart that the rest of the story sucks. So yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, then, well, this is the part where I really start tearing it to shreds. I guess I should talk about Horikoshi now. Believe it or not, this is actually his third manga he's made. His first two were cancelled very quickly into their runs after only about a year. Now, the thing about Japan is that it has this sort of unspoken rule with manga where you're given 3 chances to make something big, and if you fail every time, then that's it, you're done. Any attempts after that are usually not given by manga companies. And that pressure has been with Horikoshi for My Hero Academia's entire lifespan. Let's take the forest training arc, for example. On its own, yeah, it's a fine arc. It sets up Kamino very nicely, a couple cute moments here or there. You get the cool Muscular versus Deku fight. So yeah, it's alright. But when you know how much was cut from this arc, it becomes unacceptable. A whole backstory for Shoji was cut to keep the plot moving. Way more time being spent on the cast as a whole, and the traitor reveal happening here, which would have been so much better than where it actually happened in the story. And why did he do all this? Well, the truth is that we don't know. But it's very likely he did it because he didn't think the readers would care for this all that much. Now, I've read conflicting reports on this, but this is what I believe. And these bizarre omissions plague the manga. The backstory of Lady Nagant completely dropped, the traitor plotline not being followed up on until years later, and completely dropping the plotline with the HBSC. Horikoshi was terrified, absolutely mortified by the idea of getting cancelled. And look, I get it. Getting shut down twice already would do that to anyone, but at a certain point, he should have realized that MHA was too big to fail. And if not him, then someone around him should have helped him realize that. Because the pacing of this story is way too fast, not giving enough time for breathing. MHA is constantly slamming its foot on the pedal, moving so quick in hopes that you never get bored. Another thing to talk about is the divisive responses from both sides of the fandom on certain arcs. Japan has always enjoyed anything to do with the students in school, whereas Western fans just want more hero work and more villain fights. And for the most part, Hori tended to focus on the latter rather than the former. And one of the biggest complaints of this series is its treatment of side characters and how they hog far too much screen time while not being developed. And I feel like this is because Hori found this weird middle ground between both sides of the spectrum. The sidecast in MHA actually have more than most side characters in Shonen, but they never have a lot of depth. Let's take the students, for example. They all have names, quirks, and established personalities, but they don't get much beyond that. Now, I'm not saying they all needed to have their own individual character arcs, but you need to pick a road here, man. Either have them just be nameless NPCs or give them all full character treatment. If they were just part of Deku's class and that's it, I wouldn't have any problems, but trying to have your cake and eat it too just leaves no one happy. It makes the whole idea about this being the new generation so much weaker when it's a bunch of characters we know nothing about. So when Hori tries to cram in these very rushed and poorly thought out plot lines about Midnight's killer with Mina, or the awful discrimination arc at the very end of the story, it just feels like he's wasting my time. Just write the characters you care about. Don't try at the very end to develop for all these side characters you didn't bother with up until now. If I didn't care about them before the final arc, what makes you think I'm gonna care about them now? And I'm especially not gonna care when you introduce new characters this late into the story that exist solely for the purpose of nerfing the main villain that you made too strong. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Star now. Don't worry, I know you guys don't care, so I'll make this quick. And I realize I'm going a little out of order here, but don't worry, I got a lot to say about the Dark Hero arc. I'll get to it in a minute. So, I guess Horikoshi thought that Shigaraki was too overpowered, so he decided to nerf him at the last minute, which, I mean, wasn't that the whole reason you skipped all of Deku's training with the other quirks? Because you made the main villain too overpowered? Like, what was the point if you were gonna nerf him anyway? Couldn't you have only given him some quirks? Fucking, I don't know. So, the #1 hero from America, Star and Stripes, comes to Japan to help deal with the villain problem. And you know what? Even with all the stuff I'm about to say, her entrance is pretty badass. Like, she comes in standing on a jet. I mean, look at this. Like, this is the most American thing I've ever seen. It's awesome. And her quirk is New Order, a power that lets her set a rule onto anything she touches, allowing her to manipulate and bestow new properties onto themselves and the world around them. And yes, this includes people. And the rules just literally let her do whatever she wants. Like, she could just remove physical space if she wanted. Except she can't just say Shigaraki will die, or All for One will die, because they're technically one being right now. Like, the hijacking plotline just straight up sucks. All it really amounts to is Shigaraki getting kicked out of the story, and he didn't come back for 2 years in real time. Yeah, for the longest time, people just said Shig AFO because it was technically 2 people in the body, except All For One still had his original body, but he's also in control of Shigaraki's body. Man, I don't fucking know. The hijack sucks. Or no, this whole arc sucks. Star and Stripes was just created to nerf Shigaraki. She dies a whole 7 chapters after she gets introduced. That's it. And straight after that, the story goes back to focusing on the characters you actually care about. Like, I'm not shitting you. That's it. I'm not skipping over anything here. This is everything. Like, what was the point? Why go out of your way to make a new character just to kill them off? It's like Horikoshi realized she could break the whole verse in half and just chose to take the easy route and kill her. You could straight up remove this whole arc from the story, and it changes absolutely nothing. No joke, I was straight up not even considering talking about it for the longest time because of how irrelevant it is in the grand scheme of things. I bet most of you forgot it even existed until I mentioned it a couple minutes ago. And honestly, that really sucks because from what little we get of her, she seemed like a really cool character. And visually, I think this fight is super cool. It's the only time in the entire story where I think a complex quirk is portrayed in a really cool way, but all of it is ruined by its awful conclusion. But okay, we're done with that. So now we can get back to the characters that we actually care about, right? We'll see some interactions and some payoffs to the last arc, right? Yeah, so immediately, Horikoshi decides to follow up on the traitor plotline that he seemingly dropped up until this point. And man, you can tell he did this purely out of obligation, because this had so little effort put into it. So, Aoyama was the traitor. Yeah, this guy. Okay, whatever. This would have been a lot more powerful if he had been anything more than a comic relief up until this point, but I mean, I guess it's too late for character development at this stage of the story. But the real garbage comes from the class's reaction to him being the traitor. Now, this may be just me, but I would consider being attacked by terrorists a pretty awful experience. Maybe one that could lead to some serious trauma. Well, I mean, I guess that must be just me being dumb because they all forgive him instantly. Yeah, there's no conflicted feelings or anger. No, they all just forgive him. Even Bakugo, the guy who got kidnapped, is all like, yeah, it sucks, but meh, I'll get over it. Like, Horikoshi, why did you even bother with this? Was this really that important to follow up on after you forgot about it for years? I'ma be real with you, when Aizawa first mentioned this, I thought this was just speculation on his part. Like, it wasn't a complete confirmation, just a theory. Like, you could have easily just hand-waved this away by having a Namu infiltrate UA or something. Because trying to cram in this shit at the end just doesn't work. And we can't keep talking about MHA without talking about the big elephant in the room. The timeline. The events of My Hero Academia covers only a year. Are you serious? Really? That's what we're going with? A year? Deku goes from the weakest kid on the planet to the world's greatest hero in the span of a year. His first year of high school? Like, he's still got to go back to class after this fight is over. Look, Deku, I know you just beat the big bad guy and saved the world, but that math test, man, that's really important. We got to get back to that. This makes the story so much less interesting. All of these arcs, all of these plot lines, they all happen in just 365 days. Look. Something that I and a lot of people thought was going to happen when we first got into the story is that we were going to see all these kids grow up and be heroes. This is the story about how I became the world's greatest hero. That implies that it took place over a long stretch of time, where you went through many conflicts and hardships and grew as a person. Which, okay, yeah, I guess we sorta got that, but it being this short makes that statement lose so much of its impact. Could you imagine just how amazing it would have been to see Deku as a pro hero saving the day? Could you imagine how impactful it would have been to see all of them as adults and see how much they've grown over the years? And it wouldn't take a lot for this to happen. Just restructure things a bit. Have the first act span over the first year of high school, no problem, with the exam being their final exam as first-year students. Then Act 2 spans over the second year, with Deku leaving UA, marking the beginning of year 3, and bam, you just made things seem way less cramped. It's not a lot, but it would have gone a long way. But man, if you thought the pacing was breakneck before, oh man, Act 3 makes the previous ones look like they were running late for work. It is constantly moving on to the next thing before you had even a moment of time to think. The Dark Hero arc is one of the biggest wastes of potential I have ever seen in any story. The entire premise is that Deku has gone off with the top 3 heroes and All Might to hunt down the villains that escaped from Tartarus. And on its own, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We could really explore what we just learned about Deku with how little he views his life. Get some deep introspection into his psyche and why he feels this way. Well, joke's on you, because we don't get anything like that. In fact, that moment at the end of PLW was the last time you will ever hear Deku's thoughts on anything, so enjoy it. It is shocking just how hard that plotline is hand-waved. In a matter of 3 weeks, it's resolved. That's so lame! No one even so much as mentions it after the fact. This arc really could have been something special, where Deku really pushes himself to dangerous limits and comes close to dying a couple of times. You know what we needed? A conversation between him and All Might, and him and Ochako about just how terrible this mindset is. The fact that All Might is apologizing to him at the end when he should be scolding him just goes to show how little effort went into this storyline. But nope, the class track him down, give him a pep talk, and he goes back to normal. There are some nice moments in here, like Ochako with the megaphone and All Might's conversation with Stain. And there's even this moment I really like where Bakugo has to let Ida talk to Deku and take a backseat, which parallels the moment in Kamino where Deku had to let Kirishima talk to Bakugo. But besides that, I can't even say this arc was necessary. The status quo just goes straight back to normal after this, which is so incredibly disappointing. But he sure looks cool, right? I mean, just look at those panels of him! Oh my god, guys! Deku is cool now! He's not a loser anymore! He's so badass! If you honest to God thought any of this at one point, then you never understood Izuku Midori in the first place. And the apology from Bakugo sucks, I'm just gonna come out and say it. In fact, that's a great segue into... It is insane just how little character Deku has in this last act. He might as well just be a prop for Horikoshi to use for the plot. There's never any introspection from him or meaningful character moments. He's just going through the motions. There is so many things that Deku should be far more vocal about. How does he feel about Ochako shouting from the top of UA that he has to stay? Oh, he's got nothing. And to everyone who says, oh, but she was tired. No, Ochako Uraraka is not a real person. She is a character. I had hope, just a glimmer, that we were finally going to get that scene between the two of them where they reveal their feelings for each other. It's been built up since the very beginning of the story, and we're just never going to have that payoff. And Bakugo's apology that was also built up from the beginning? Nope, we don't even get Deku's thoughts on it. We never get that scene of the two of them having a real conversation where they finally make peace with each other. Instead, Deku just stands around like a mindless drone, doesn't talk to anyone. No scene with All Might either. In fact, All Might even knowing about this bad tendency of Deku's and not doing anything about it is so blatantly out of character. This is something All Might should have taken care of as soon as he learned about this. But nope, no character drama, no interactions, just keep the plot moving along. It's actually amazing how the arc that was supposed to flesh Deku out made him even more shallow. Look, it's no secret at this point that Horikoshi just wants the story to be over already. That's why all this happened. At some point during this arc, he decided that he wanted to move on from MHA and end the series. And look, I get it. He's been working on this story for nearly 10 years of his life, and he wants out now. But if things were really that bad, you should have taken a break a long time ago. And let's not act like Shonen Jump wouldn't have given it. I know everyone likes to paint them as this evil, horrible company, which is true, but even they will give creators a break when they need it. Every character has suffered from Hori rushing the manga, but Deku is easily the worst offender. Deku is the most frustrating part of this last act for me, because he's a character I used to have so much fondness for, and it's so incredibly saddening that Hori just doesn't know what to do with him. I really think if given more time in the oven, Deku could have had a great character arc where he finds his own self-worth and reason for living. Vinland Saga is another story with a character who goes through his own arc of self-reflection and comes out the other side a better man. And that could have happened with Deku. But here in this final arc, Deku has learned nothing, making the entire Dark Hero arc a complete waste of time. Just looking at him in the manga, I feel nothing. There's no emotion from him in the slightest, he never gives his thoughts on anything, and he doesn't interact with anyone outside of a fight. Even now in the final arc, Deku is such a non-factor. His entire role in the story has been mitigated to just looking angry or blank-faced and fight Shigaraki off-screen. Hori decided that all of this other stuff, like All For One no-diffing a bunch of heroes, Shoji's stupid discrimination, and Iron Might was more important than the main plot of the story. Deku and Shigaraki have such little screen time in this arc that it is laughable. Like, I'm reading the chapters weekly, and every time the story shows them, I just keep thinking, why is that not the focus right now? And that sucks, because some parts of this arc are good. The Todoroki family had such a great conclusion to their story, with Shoto finally taking down Dabi and accepting that he is who he is no matter what his bloodline is. And Ochako finally reached through to Toga, letting Toga finally have someone in her life who accepts her for who she is. Meanwhile, Deku's over here with nothing, and Shigaraki, who has been out of the story for 2 years, came back just to get overshadowed by All for One. This story is simply afraid to let Shigaraki be the main villain, a title that he earned. Which, you know what, I guess is fitting because Deku gets overshadowed by All Might. Words cannot do justice on just how much I hate this plotline. The whole idea of All Might's arc after Kamino is that he was going to put heroics behind him and focus on training the new generation. And Hori threw all of that from out the 30th story and into a wood chipper. All of a sudden, All Might just has this suit that not only lets him withstand the power of All for One, but gives him the powers of every student in his class. I'm not making this up, dude. This is for real. I get that MHA is futuristic, but this sort of technology is completely world-breaking. Why even bother with heroes? Just have people use these suits and act as police. This fight is awful. Logically, it doesn't make any sense and destroys the whole passing of the torch theme that the series had been telling from the start. You know what would have been awesome? If neither All Might or All for One were present in this arc at all, and they placed all their faith in their successors. Can you imagine just how cooler that would have been? The mentor characters of the series take a backseat to the fight and let the successors do all the talking. This is the story of the new generation. They are the ones who are the focus now. Not only that, but it would really hammer home that the new generation has learned from the mistakes of the older ones, and they are the ones who will do better. That's so much more powerful than them having another rematch when the focus should be on the new generation. And the worst part is that that's not even the worst thing about this arc. Yeah, you were all waiting for me to bring up Bakugo, don't deny it. This was it. This was the straw that finally broke the camel's back for me. This was the point that I completely lost faith in Horikoshi. Like, at least before I had some things to fall back on, but no, this was it. I just couldn't take it anymore. So Bakugo's heart gets blown up by All for One and he dies. Except, no, he doesn't die because this guy, Edgeshot, is just gonna stitch his heart back together. This is real, dude. Like, for anybody who hasn't read this stuff, it might seem like I'm making all this up. No, I'm not. This is actual stuff that someone put on paper. Not only is the heart stitching together plotline laughably stupid, but it just reinforces the problems with Bakugo as a character. Yeah, for as much as I praised him in the earlier parts of this video, he's always been held back by one single thing. He's never gotten a villain fight. Yeah, he's the only character that never got one. Deku has far too many to count. Shoto got Dabi, Ida got Stain, All Might got All for One, Endeavor got High End, Ochako got Toga, hell, even Kirishima got to fight a villain. But Bakugo? Nothing. How funny is that? For as much as people wrongfully dog on Ochako, she at least got her own villain, and Bakugo didn't. That's such a waste of him as a character. Can you imagine how cool it would have been if at some point in Act 2, after his fight with Deku, Bakugo had to fight a villain that led him to accept that he's not a kid anymore, and he has to grow up. It could have been like Endeavor's fight with High End. I just don't know how a character that Horikoshi very blatantly loves and is very proud of was never given a villain fight. And people will excuse this with, oh, Bakugo was his own villain, and that should justify it. How? Not to mention, his role in the story has just been boiled down to being Deku's cheerleader. This entire arc, all Bakugo has been thinking about is Deku. I'm not shitting you. The man is on his deathbed and all he can think about is Izuku Midoriya. What happened to the Bakugo who was going to be the #1 hero? The one who had his own agency as a character? I get that Deku is an important person in his life, but why is he all Bakugo's thinking about? Why is he not thinking about Kirishima, his best friend, or All Might, his mentor? Or, you know, his own parents who are watching him die. And this process wasn't short. Oh no, he was out of the manga for a whole year. Let me tell you, people did not respond positively to this plot point in the slightest. This is easily the most infamous chapter in MHA history. No one bought that Bakugo was actually going to die here, and if you did, you are a poor delusional fool. Do you really think Hori would go through all that effort of giving Bakugo this great character arc just to kill him off at the very end before he could be a real hero? And you know what? I wouldn't find this nearly as dumb if it weren't for the fact that we know nothing about Edgeshot. He's just a guy. Why isn't Genus the one trying to save him? He's the one that Bakugo has an actual connection with and knows how much potential he has. It's just bad writing all around. If you really wanted him out of the story for a bit, then just have him get injured, have his leg get sprained or something. That'd be way more tolerable than him just straight up dying and getting revived after this. And to his credit, I think Horikoshi knew this too. So this section of the video was written a little later, but Bakugo has gotten up now, and he fought all for one. I think if you told me back in 2020 that this would have happened, I would have been super excited, but now I just don't care. It's just comical that Bakugo had his heart explode like 20 minutes ago, and now he's fighting off the Lord of Evil. And I didn't talk about this much because I know it's a pointless complaint, but man, Horikoshi's bad choreography is really tedious. Okay, the thing with Hori is that he's never been that great on the technical side of the character fights, but he always excelled at the emotions of the characters in those specific moments. And this wasn't too much of a problem normally because arcs in MHA are pretty short. The longest pre-Final War arc is only about 50 chapters, but this arc goes well above that, and the pacing really makes the flow of these fights drag on. It's not fun to read one chapter of the heroes dogpiling on All for One for weeks on end when there's no visual flair to make it interesting. As a matter of fact, there's this other manga right now that has the reverse problem of this, but man, I'm struggling to think of it. Nah, it's probably nothing. I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, back to Bakugo. So he gets up and saves All Might from getting killed by his own stupidity, and then he takes on All for One on his own. And you're not going to believe this. So Edge Shot is now this little string because he used up most of his body to save Bakugo, and now he can hop around and talk. Now, there is this nice moment of Bakugo smiling and it looking like a normal kid, but this fight is so stupid. Because Bakugo got another quirk awakening. Yeah, he gets 3 in the span of 2 months. Really just emphasizing that he should have gotten more villain fights, but I guess what's done is done. And it's not even a fight, it's just All for One getting dogpiled on. Like, he brings out this super mega destroyer mode, and it doesn't even do anything, and he goes down to 1 howitzer impact. And right at the end, Hori tries to be all poetic and gives him his own All Might pose. And this is where I can imagine Horikoshi with his pen thinking that this will make up for how wasted Bakugo was. But no, I'm sorry, it's not. This is it, you guys. This is his last contribution to the story, the fan-favorite character of MHA, who won every single popularity poll, and he got a cheap, half-assed conclusion to his arc. And the worst part is that this worked for most people. Bakugo fans are so desperate for him to get anything that they'll just take what they can get at this point. But hey, I can't blame them, because, well, I'm really not too far off from that. Alright, so this part of the video I felt like I had to do out of obligation. I'm not reading any script, I'm just kind of free-flowing this. Is that the right word? I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, Deku and Shigaraki's fight. It finally started after, like, forever. And, well, it's pretty mixed so far. On the one hand, it is nice to see Deku doing something and actually thinking about something that isn't One for All or the immediate conflict. And you know what? Before this started, I do have to say, my hopes were a little bit higher up than most people because I really like Ochako and Toga. Like, I will fight people who hate that arc. I think it's great. And, well, I thought this wouldn't be that far off in terms of quality. I really thought that... I put all my stocks in Hori, is what I'm trying to say. I'm very badly trying to explain this. And there is this really great moment I love from Deku so far where he says that, no, you are a human, and I will try to save you. I'm not going to stop. You're not going to get rid of me that easily. And that's great, yes! That's what I wanted this whole time! And then the story suddenly becomes about, no, he has to give One for All away. Are you fucking kidding me? Look, I am not in favor of this. I really don't want this to happen. Look, there's still a chance that this could play out. Look, Hori is known for baiting us a lot of the time, so who knows? Maybe this is one of those things, but I am really not in favor of Deku becoming quirkless at the end of the story. That's such a bad and terrible fate for him. And man, this arc has really made me hate the Vestiges. Like, they are just here to be a mouthpiece for Deku, because Hori is so afraid of letting him talk. Like, why are they the ones coming up with this plan? Why is Deku not doing it himself? But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I'm not going to spend too long on it, because, I mean, it's only like 3 chapters so far, so that's where we're at right now. But I figured I had to discuss it a little. There's even more dumb stuff like this, but I would be here all day, and this video is long enough as is. You get my point. The writing of this last act is nowhere near the quality of the previous two. And as a result, this drags the series down so many pegs because of it. At this point, a lot of people are just reading just to see how it ends. They put years of investment into this story, and they can't let it go without seeing the ending. That's not to say no one's enjoying it, but it's very clear that most are disappointed. My Hero Academia captured lightning in a bottle. It could have been revered as much as a story like Fullmetal Alchemist or Death Note, but instead it was rushed to a conclusion, because the author just wanted it to be over. Give it another year, and My Hero Academia will have ended, and I don't think many will look back on it fondly. I remember when this was going to be the ultimate shonen, the one that learned from the mistakes of the older ones like Dragon Ball or Naruto, only for it to fall into all the same holes as those series did long ago. And ultimately, that's what went wrong. My Hero Academia stopped being a character drama and became a story about good guys fighting bad guys. And that kills me. As I've spent months making this video, I've thought a lot about how I wanted it to end, and I think the best way for me to end this is just by talking from the heart. I don't know Kohei Horikoshi. I've never met the man. I just loved reading his story, and he doesn't owe me or anyone else anything. But you know what? I think he owed it to himself to see this thing through properly. I mean, this is your legacy. This is gonna be what defines you. You're never gonna get another success in your life like My Hero. And to see such a talented man push himself so hard every week just so he wouldn't have to make this manga anymore is so incredibly sad. Horikoshi is an incredible artist. If you've made it this far into the video, you should have seen all the amazing art he's drawn, and it just gets better as the series goes on. It's the only aspect of the manga that doesn't waver. And when he's in the right environment, he can be a great writer as well. So, I don't want this video to go down as another MHA hate video, because there's enough of that on the internet already. I thought a lot about the question of, would I still recommend MHA today, knowing where it went? Are those first two acts so good that they're worth going through, only to get hit with Act 3 where everything takes a nosedive? And even with everything I said in this video, yeah, I still would. It was never going to be this impeccable masterpiece, but at the end of the day, I think it is a story that will stick with you. For as much as I don't like the final arc, at least so far, seeing the characters I spent the last 9 years with, not you, getting satisfying conclusions, has made this worth it. It was a story that got me through some incredibly rough parts of my life. Reading the PLW arc week to week is some of the best times I've had with a manga or anime. For better or worse, this story opened the door to an entire medium for me. And even if it didn't live up to my own hopes, it'll always be special to me. Oh man. I'm glad I finally got all that off my chest. Well, at least I still have Jujutsu Kaisen. Oh God!